I'm
So,
with Hello, Colum.
hello, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm with Colum McCann here today, and we're talking about his latest book, Apeirogon, as part of Bendigo Writers Festival's Backstory series, a very early part of our Backstory series. So, lots of mistakes being made by moi, not by Colum. Colum's speaking to us from near New York, and we're very grateful to him for joining us tonight. Apeirogon is a unique book. It's a book you have to read to understand what's going on, what it's about, and why it's important. So we're really just touching the surface of it today. And I'd like to ask Colum first, when he went on that fateful trip with Telos, the non-profit organisation, to Palestine and Israel, was that the first time that you'd ever been there?
Yeah, I mean, in a certain way, maybe we've all been there. I mean, Jerusalem has all these implications. It's the meeting place of three continents, and then these major religions, and whether you're Muslim and whether you're Jewish or whether you're Christian, a part of our imagination always goes towards Bethlehem or Jerusalem, but physically. It was the first time that I'd been there, and it's almost 6 years ago now. And I went with a group called Telos and Narrative 4, which is my global story exchange organization that I co-founded with Lisa Consiglio. And, I've told this story a few times, but it doesn't matter to repeat myself, because my heart was completely blown open. I mean, I felt that my world had been completely disrupted by this trip. And in particular, the second to last night, when I'm in a town called Beit Jala, which is right beside Bethlehem, right beside Jerusalem. And it was 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock on a sort of like wet, windy, dark winter afternoon, and walked up this set of stairs, and I met these two men, Rami Elhanan and Bassam Aramin, and they told me the stories about how they had lost their daughters. Now I thought they were telling that story for the very first time, or it felt that way to me. I was certainly like hearing it. That I found out later that not only had they told the story for years and years and years, but that particular day they'd probably told the story about 2 or 3 times to other groups. But it didn't matter, because it had the magic of authenticity and beauty and forgiveness and grief and all this like weird cocktail of human emotions that I think, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but all of that goes to the heart of what the literary act should be.
Indeed.
Love, pride.
I was thinking as you were talking then, it must have been quite shocking for a novelist to suddenly confront characters that are stronger than what you're able to do on the page. And maybe that galvanized you to do this extraordinary attempt to do something which got that on the page.
Actually, that's the first time it's been expressed to me that way, and it's perfect, because they are stronger than what they could have been through my imaginative access. If you we'll just take the Palestinian man, Bassam Aramin, right? At the age of 17, he becomes a lookout. He and his friends find these dud grenades in a cave near Hebron. They decide to throw them at an Israeli jeep that's going through. He's the lookout, but he has polio, and he also has a limp. So, and he sort of jokes later on. He says, like, who gives the job of lookout to the guy with the limp? They throw these dud grenades. They fizzle out underneath a jeep. They get caught. He spends 7 years in prison. He becomes commander of the Fatah unit in prison. He's super smart, super empathetic, and engaging. And one night, he's in his cell, and he watches a documentary about the Holocaust. And he wants to watch the documentary because he wants to watch Jewish people die, but then something happens to him. He gets disrupted. His intellect, his heart, his soul, his spirit gets disrupted. And then he comes out of prison after 7 years, and he founds an organization called Combatants for Peace. People who have fought on either side or all sides. I don't like saying this, both sides. He brings Israelis together with Palestinians in the town of Beit Jala to talk about how they can engage with the ideas of one another and maybe talk about peace, combatants for peace. 2 years later, Bassam Aramin is sitting there and he gets a phone call to say that he, the peace activist, is now the father of a girl who, his 10-year-old daughter, who got a rubber bullet in the back of the head. Now, honestly, I mean, my novelist imagination can't compete with the truth of that. It's astounding. Then he goes to Bradford in England, and he becomes a scholar of peace, and he studies the Holocaust, and then he becomes best friends with this Israeli man, and yet he still sticks up for all of his principles. And how could I have created such a character? No, he came to me, he presented himself, and I was lucky enough that these extraordinary people, and Rami is just as extraordinary, that these extraordinary people came to me and somehow said, okay, come inside. I will talk to you. I will take you on my motorbike. I will take you in my car. You can stay in Jericho. You can stay in Jerusalem. You can meet my family. And I said all along, I want to write a novel. And they're saying, that's fine. And I said, no. I'm not sure that you really understand. I want to write, and I want to imagine what it's like to be in your head. And they said, fine, that's okay. Because the only thing that we care about is our message, that is simple and extraordinarily difficult at the same time. We need to know each other. And if we don't know each other above ground, we will end up knowing each other 6 feet below ground. And that's the essence of what they're saying, and that sounds very simple, but like nothing is simple, especially the beauty of simplicity, because or even the idea of simplification is not simple, and in fact it's so profound sometimes.
It was also waiting for you, Colum, because you'd done the work on the Northern Ireland peace process. You'd done a book on that. You'd done 30 years of walking towards this confusion, as you call it. And the preparation that you had done, it must have felt... do you believe in fate?
You know what? I don't know whether I believe in fate, but I do believe, and I began to believe as I sort of wrote this, that this was the culmination of so much for me. And it began, as you say, like 30 years ago, when as a 20-year-old, I took or 35 years ago now, I took a bicycle. I came from Ireland, where I had a job as a journalist and was doing pretty well. And I gave it all up, and I ended up taking a bicycle across the United States, listening to people. And it was kind of amazing. And I didn't know what was happening to me, but I began to feel that stories and storytelling was where the heart reckoned with itself. And then I went to Texas, and I worked with juvenile delinquents. And then I went to university down in Texas. Then I went to Japan with my wife. And, and this is me still in my mid-20s. And then I published my first book when I was like 28. But I truly believe that everything led to me sort of meeting Rami and Bassam 10 books later, because everything that I've stuffed into this life so far is actually operating there within the pages of this book. And it's not me. I mean, this is really not a book about me. This is a book about Rami and Bassam. And in fact, one of the secrets about the book is that you happen to be the narrator. You who reads it, you actually become the narrator. And maybe that's true of every single book in the world, but I've never heard in a book you the reader, actually being told that you are now narrating this book, which sounds weird, and I don't want it to put people off. But it actually happens in section 1001, which is right in the middle of the book. I'll just give you the one sentence because I don't want to take too much time. It says, and we talk about meeting Rami and Bassam, and it says, so, and we have come to listen to the stories of Bassam and Rami, and to find within their stories another story, a song of songs, discovering themselves, you and me, in the stone-tiled chapel where we sit for hours, eager, hopeless, buoyed, confused, cynical, complicit, silent, our memories imploding, our synapses skipping in the gathering dark, remembering while listening all of those stories that are yet to be told. And it was when I discovered that because honestly, for a long time, I didn't know who was narrating this book. Like, that might sound a little bit crazy to people, but writers operate like musicians. We wait for the moment when the note is going to hit. We wait for the moment when something, just sounds right. And we go and we excavate and we work and work and work. And actually, one of the things that I like to talk a lot about now is that writers are not as smart as people want them to be or make them out to be. They're made much smarter by their readers. And the readers are the ones who bring it out into the world.
Yes, but they're also made much smarter, I think, by that moment of opening. And I heard Rami and Bassam's talk about the wall and the chink in the wall that lets the light in and the wall falls down. I actually think that works for writing as well, for you to be ready to because most of us I want to write about this. And we sit down because we're struggling and we're fearful and we want it to be good. Whereas if you let the chink and the light comes in, then this stuff, and you must have sat there thinking, where's this coming from, Colum? I'm interested how hard it might have been when you were sitting there, and did it kind of do that, take you over?
It did. And honestly, there were days when I would wake up the next day and like look over the stuff that I'd written the night before, and like I'd say, like, was I drunk or what? Where did this come from? And like, who is this, and how did I get there? And then but then I would build it and build it and build it and build it and build it. This is a 5-year book, and 5 years is a lot of time in your life. You figure you're going to live to whatever it happens to be. I don't know. My mom is 93, so let's say I hope that she gets to 100. But for part of her, so 1/20 of her life would have been spent on some, and that's a lot of time. And you have to love the subject, and you have to love the people that are in there. But you also have to go to the deepest, darkest places. And honestly, in writing this book, I went pretty deep and pretty dark, and because Smadar is killed in a suicide bombing, and Apeir is killed with a rubber bullet in the back of her head, and these two men go around the world talking about this and turning their grief into another weapon. But I want people to know, like, it's incredibly important for me that people know that this is actually a hopeful book, or that the stories of Bassam and Rami are incredibly hopeful. and that you do not come out of this book. You do come out of it feeling a bit bruised and battered, yes, or disrupted anyway. But wow, those two guys, they believe in some form of hope that's almost incandescent, you know.
They're funny. They're funny people too, and you use their
That's
humour.
see, that's the thing. You got it. See, like that. There's a moment in the book where I do the sketch from TV, and the tagline is "Haven't the Jews suffered enough?" And like some people might find that offensive, but Rami and Bassam, and Rami in particular, who's Jewish, doesn't find it offensive at all. And here's what happened. I was in the 92nd Street Y in New York. These two guys, my characters from my novel, fly over from well, they came from Tel Aviv to Istanbul, to New York. They're there with me. We're in the 92nd Street Y, which is the cultural center, primarily a Jewish cultural center, and they get a standing ovation. And Bassam, the Palestinian man, like nudges me, so like, a Palestinian, I'm getting a standing ovation here. And we go down the road, and we go into a restaurant, and we're sort of like enjoying the evening, and but it's been cold outside, and they're both wearing their raincoats, and they slide into these seats, and Rami is a little bit bigger than Bassam is, and he's trying to get his jacket off like this. It's like pulling, it's like and Bassam leans across, and this is beautiful because this is tiny, but beautiful, and he takes Rami's arm from the jacket and then just whispers in his ears, only that I could hear because I was across the table from him. He said, "Haven't the Jews suffered enough?"
It's brilliant. That's just
and what happened is that Rami put his head on Bassam's shoulder and laughed and laughed and laughed. And so they have this friendship. They have this sense of humor. They also have this sense of purpose. And that's what they're about. Because they're about disrupting the comfortable narrative. To say that an Israeli is this, a Palestinian is this, and only this. They want to scuff it up, mess it up, whatever it happens to be, in order to make us think twice about what's going on and what we lend our money to and what we lend our support to, and what we think of what's going on in the world. They are, I mean, I haven't really said this in any public forum, but I hope to God someday that their organization, the Parent Circle, and in particular Rami and Bassam, become recipients of the Nobel Prize. I mean, because I think that they're up there with, Gandhi, and they're up there with MLK, and they're up there with people who did the peace work in Northern Ireland and the John Humes of the world. I mean, yeah, they're really extraordinary.
Get it totally, absolutely. When you talk about this, because the story is so amazing and these people are so amazing and the way you've managed to frame it is so amazing, do you then find the bits and the parts of the novel, the layers of the novel? I've spoken to you, I think, briefly on email about the birds. And I just love the image of the V shape with the birds, the one wing helping the next one up, and also the ortolans which are being eaten in by Mitterrand. I mean, it comes back to me all the time because it's me. That's what's in my head. It's what you're saying. I've made that part of your story. Have you discovered that there are you surprised by what comes to the surface with people like me and all your other readers?
Well, the thing was that I kind of wanted to mess with your head, and I kind of wanted you, my reader, to be the same as me, to be completely confused, and to be completely heartbroken, and to be completely understanding, all at the same time. because I actually think that one of the things about the contemporary human condition, not just like about this story, is that we're so friggin' siloed right now. We are coming indoors. We are closing the curtains. We're locking the front door. We are saying, stay away from me. Not just for corona reasons, I mean, that are part, but for other reasons, like stay away from my truth. And I don't know, maybe I'm just naive about this. It seemed to me that certainly generations ago, uh, people were much more willing to embrace their mistakes. People were much more willing to say, I'm an idiot. I don't know. I'm confused. Teach me a little bit rather than saying, let me tell you what it's all about. I don't know whether that's happening in Australia. It's certainly happening in the United States.
If it's happening in the United States, it happens here just afterwards.
Right.
But Colum, the word confused, I get, but it's actually the clarity that comes through the confusion. What you've done is pattern the birds, the birds that work together and then are destroyed and then do these flights and then do all these things. It's as though, and I wouldn't call it a metaphor because that sounds too planned, but it's as though, again, the idea rises and it works for me, and then maybe someone else, the Holocaust, the Bradford scenes, all that works for them. So it's as though it's a touch. You've touched the computer screen for me, and this explodes.
Right, and in that sense, I have to say that I felt like the conductor of an incredible symphony of musicians, some of whom I didn't know whatsoever. Like, honestly, I mean, do I know all that much about, deeply what is going on, or am I just like feeling like the music that's coming out from this particular place that I'm saying, okay, this sounds correct, okay, let's go here, give me some more here, give me some more there. So while I was writing it, terrified, by the way, terrified about like making mistakes and being naive or being sentimental or being arrogant or being didactic and all of these things, I just started to feel like, okay, whatever the music is, it should be right. And so this is actually a very simple novel. It's about two men, who, one is Israeli, one is Palestinian. The Israeli wakes up in the morning and he drives on a motorbike towards a monastery in Beit Jala. He tells a story. He meets his friend Bassam Aramin, who also tells a story, and then Bassam drives home. And that evening, well, I won't give the last scene away because the last scene is my own personal favorite. Very simple story. Two men meet, tell stories, and then go home. At the same time, everything happens. So nothing happens and everything happens. And so it becomes about the history of explosives, the history of birds, bird migration, water patterns, music, all of these different things that were going on. How this happened to me, I kind of don't know. But I've worked really, as you said, I've worked really hard to get there. And now that it's there, hopefully it will do its work. Because it's not mine anymore. It belongs to all the people who are so much, and I'm not bullshitting. I shouldn't curse on it. It belongs to all. It belongs to all the people who are so much smarter than me in relation to all of this. And okay, maybe there's a 15-year-old out there who looks at this, or maybe she happens to be 50, or maybe she happens to be 75. Who knows? what happens to be. But there's a Greta there who can understand what this sort of stuff is about and can turn these things around. Because I have to believe that we turn these things around. You know, it's pretty miserable out there right now. I mean, certainly in Israel and Palestine, it's really miserable. Like, if you talk about politics in Israel, it's like to the right of the till of the Hun, uh, you know, and then, you know, things that are happening within the Palestinian Authority, within Hamas. It's like, oh my gosh. But part of me has to believe that Bassam is right and Rami is right when they talk about, like, occupation will end. Occupation is real, and occupation will end when we get to know each other, and when we make that sort of fateful leap towards trying to understand where the other person has come from.
I wouldn't argue with you, Colin, but I think you can afford to own it a little bit just for a while. I think you should be mighty proud of what you've done. Apeirogon, when I first came across it, and everybody asks you this, I took me so many goes to get it stuck in my head. What's
Right.
the name of that AP thing that he's written as an AP thing? And I know you said, and now I'm so thank you, because now I know what Apeirogon means, and I'm a little bit cleverer, which is what you're saying. You know, I'm a little bit, I now have a little bit of access into that geometric term and some information. You said you came across it. Now, how the hell did you come across the word Apeirogon? Did you go looking for it?
Here's the deal. So when I'm writing about Northern Ireland, and I knew the stuff in Northern Ireland was like pretty crazy. So I wrote a book called Transatlantic, which largely examines, you know, the Northern Irish peace process, and a good chunk of it takes place with Senator George Mitchell negotiating peace, and he as a character looks at it in a polygonal way. And so I'm looking up words for polygon and and I find decagon and hectagon and blah blah blah, and then weirdly I find this word Apeirogon, and I didn't put it in Transatlantic because I don't know what it was. It was like I put it in the back of my head, back here behind the bald spot, and said, okay, I'm going to use that somehow. Listen, honestly, when I said to my publishers, I'm going to call this Apeirogon, they were like, no, they were very good about it in the end. I mean, Bloomsbury, you know, who like they were so, but people were freaked out by the title. How can you like write about Israel and Palestine in the first place and then call it like a word that nobody knows? And I didn't know it, and like I just discovered it. I only met two people who, in the course of all my travels while I was researching the book, people know about it now. People come up to me and say, "Yes, I studied the Apeirogon," but in the course of, and one was Ben Rhodes, who is Obama's speechwriter, and he was involved in the Obama administration, like a super genius guy. And then Jeff Bezos' son, who's also a mathematician, and he said, "Oh yeah, I mean, Apeirogon." Like, but listen, I just felt it was the right, and in the short term, it's a bad title. Because people go into a bookshop and they look and say, "Oh God, what's that?" In the long term, it will be a good title because, you know, people will identify with it and people will say, "Ah, I know what that is. It's a shape with a countably infinite number of sides, and I can land in any part of the shape and be at my finite point, and yet also be part of the infinity. In other words, I am involved, and one story is all stories." And somehow, something happening in you know, in Melbourne or in Bendigo, whatever, like, happens in Dublin somehow too, happens in New York somehow too, not in some weird twee way, but in a powerful disruptive way. And that really what it says is that we matter. And that's a pretty bold statement to say in an era of meaninglessness.
But an era too, Colum, of opinions, which is what you were saying about, it's okay to be confused. But everybody says, what do you think? You've got to have. So, is Palestine right? Is Israel right? Should they have done this? Should they have done that? And you're going.
I mean, I'm going. I don't know. Come with me come with me on this journey. You know the old phrase. I mean, I'm sure it's an Australian phrase that opinions are like arseholes and everyone has one. Opinions to me are kind of very uninteresting. Opinions are the guy who's sitting in the corner in the party, spouting off, telling you how you should feel. Especially when opinions are directed and saying, you must think of it this way. What's much more interesting to me is to allow people to feel something, to experience something, to be experiential, to feel the pulse of the moment, and then get to the human heart of things. Because, okay, opinions and facts are mercenary things. You can take them and you can package them and you can use them. Stories and texture are different things. They I don't know, they vibrate in a different way, and I think they're much more truthful. It's hard to explain this to people, but I do think that fiction, quote unquote, which is a word that I don't really know. See, again, I want to express my ignorance about the word fiction. Fiction actually gets to the human heart quicker than nonfiction. But a blend of those two things becomes stories and storytelling, which is what we do every day down the pub, or in our homes, or across divides, and it's what Rami and Bassam are talking about. Let me tell you a story, and this will break your heart. And if your heart gets broken in the proper way, you will begin to understand then the facts and the figures. You'll want to know what was the 67 war, what happened in 48, what is Zionism, what is the Nakba, all of these different things, but only if you grab the person first.
Yeah, but you've got to listen. And that's the thing, I think, that I'm wondering about the form of because if you'd written that as a story of 600 pages that went from A to B to C, it would have perhaps felt very much like you had to commit yourself to this story, and it's a hard story. Whereas with all your 1001, you're seducing us into saying, it's okay, just look at this bit now and it's short, and look at this bit and it's a bit longer, and look at this bit, and you must have felt that it's a form for the time.
Sam Beckett talked about that the job of the writer was to find a form to accommodate the mess. And I was very conscious that I wanted a form to accommodate the contradictory mess, yes. But also I wanted to come in as, and I realize this is kind of pretentious and silly and maybe self-congratulatory, but to come in as humble and as stupid as possible, right? To acknowledge that I'm coming in here, and I'm going to have to practice some form of intellectual aikido, and people are going to come, and the Israelis are going to come after me here, and the Palestinians are going to come after me here, and the Americans are going to come here, and the conservative, and I'm going to have to do this. But I want to do this, and I want to acknowledge that I don't know, but I really kind of want to know. So I stepped into this after the meeting with Rami and Bassam, and honestly, I mean, I have read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books now. I have hundreds of hours of interviews. I have done, months and months and months of work in Palestine, in Israel. And can I say that I know what's going on? No, I can't. I actually can't even tell you that I know what's going on in Ireland, but that's part of my job. And if we're brave enough to say, oh gosh, I actually don't know, but I want to know, it doesn't become about cultural appropriation, it becomes about cultural celebration. It becomes about somebody going in with her head bowed or his head bowed saying, teach me, rather than this is what it is. So teach me is probably the best two words that we can have right now. And by the way, I don't know about you, but teachers are my heroes.
And teachers,
I think about, yeah.
Sorry, Colum, I was going to say, but absolutely. But certain kinds of teachers and certain people who celebrate, you say, let's learn, but it's so wonderful. What we've lost, I think, is the feeling of joy and pleasure. And, I learned about Apeirogon, it lifted me. It made me feel better. It didn't make me feel, oh, God, I've learned something. Colin taught me about this word. How I didn't feel weighed down. I felt lifted up by that. And that, for me, you having the courage, I don't know how you got hit in that bald spot, but it gave you the courage, and from these men and from that visit, from that all that stuff and that journey, you found the moral courage to do this thing. And what joy you must have felt at the same time as you knew that if your readers, and they have got it, haven't they, Colum? The reviews and people talking about it, it must feel pretty good at the moment.
They have got it, yeah. I mean, it's been pretty extraordinary. I mean, I've written 10 books, and one book in particular, Let the Great World Spin, touched a lot of people, and another book called Everything in This Country Must, which is about Northern Ireland, that sort of touched a small number of people in Northern Ireland, but none of my books have actually hit. Like this, so that like I'm getting these emails even during Corona time, people are finding my email address out of the blue, and writing to my publishers and stuff saying, and here's the great thing, I mean, here's what's beautiful too, people are giving money to the Parents Circle. There was an American philanthropist, a Jewish philanthropist from New York, gave them $30,000 to start a campaign purely on the fact that he had read Apeirogon. There was an English philanthropist who is involved with politics in Israel and in Palestine, and she gave the money to the Parents Circle, and it brought up things for Telos, which is the great organization that brought me over there in the first place. And the thing that's closest to my heart, and the thing that we want to bring to Australia, is Narrative 4. So people have been giving money to Narrative 4 on the basis of having read Apeirogon, saying that we need to know about what is a story and what is a story exchange. So we've been chatting with them, some schools in Victoria, and yeah, I know, and this is the thing. This is where the teachers are like, okay, it's fronted by writers and artists and musicians. That's cool. Okay, we're all fine, but the real heroes, the ones who do the actual work, are the teachers, because then they bring this idea of story sharing, story exchanging to students, and it gets more and more and more expansive. So that, like, okay, the only way I can explain it to people is this. We are now running, we run programs all over the world. We're in 12 countries. It's called narrative4.com, 4 as in the number. The program we're running right now is between University Heights High School in the South Bronx of New York, the second poorest congressional district in the country, and Floyd County High School in Kentucky, another incredibly poor district. One primarily white and or Cherokee, one primarily African American and or immigrant, one primarily red and Trump leaning, one primarily blue and whoever leaning, you know, and you know they're supposedly so different to one another. I'm sure there are I don't know anything about Australia, but I'm sure there are equivalents there. We bring them together, these young people. They're 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. And we ask them not to have an opinion, not to do anything, but to tell a story. Tell a story about something that happened to you. And then that other person tells that story back to them in the first person. So the magic, the secret sauce is that the young girl who lives in the Bronx, who wears a hijab and listens to rap music in her ear pods, tells her story to the guy who owns a hunting rifle down in Kentucky, and then the guy who owns a hunting rifle down in Kentucky has to get in front of the group and say, "Hi, my name is Fatma, and I live in the South Bronx," and she has to say, "Hi, my name is Rick," you know, and you know the reason I have a hunting rifle is, you know, this. And all these barriers come tumbling down in the most extraordinary way. And I do believe that stories and storytelling are the well from which any proper revolution is going to rise from.
That is, I hadn't realised that was the knack, that was the thing at Narrative 4. I'll put up a link to Narrative 4 so that we can spread the word about that. That's terrific. And of course, again, there's that metaphor thing about what you're doing, you know, that what those kids are therefore learning what it's like to write in their heads, and if they then were able to, and the next step is to write it down, and that becomes even more clarified and more difficult and brings all that in. I'd like to apologise to you and to any muck up with occasionally you say things and the voice doesn't match your mouth. Which is fine.
Oh, okay.
That's fine. But that's because we're in Bendigo, and our broadband is not great here, but isn't it wonderful that we've been able to do that anyway and to fly across the world and listen to you? It's been
my friends and family say the same thing all the time. Like we watch you and then
it's astonishing, isn't it? It's wonderful. I'm so grateful to you. It's been better than I could have even hoped for. I know we're talking hope today. I'd like to just deeply congratulate you for for publishing Apeirogon, and I will watch it soar. Thank you, Colum McCann.
Can I just say something?
Please.
I'm sorry that I wasn't there, and I hope you guys invite me back, because I will be there next year or the year after or whenever it happens to be, and I feel a real kinship with what's going on, and let's make something good out of this moment, because we can. I really think we can.
I very much look forward. I so hope that happens, and thank you once more, and thank you to your publisher. Goodbye.
Thank you.